particularly to our witnesses and guests, normally I like to start right on time, which is about 2 minutes ago. However, due to the fact we were somewhat delayed this afternoon and the arrival of our Paralympians and our Olympians on the floor, I'm going to give us a grace of about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then I'll start even if we don't have a full contingent, but as long as we have quorum. So I do apologize for the late start.
They might have started the television if you want to suspend, because they saw you with the government.
Yeah, we'll suspend until 3:45. No, I should say 3:35. Colleagues, being 3:35, we will start. We do have quorum, even though not all of our members are here. Before we begin with our witnesses, a question for the committee. The bells will start ringing at 5:30, and we will have to suspend or adjourn at that time, depending on the will of the committee. We have a couple of options, because at 5:30 we had the presentation by the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. We have 2 options. I've consulted with Mr. Palasek. We can either come back after votes, which would mean we would recommence at around 6:30 to 6:45 for the presentation, or Mr. Palasek said he would also be available tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Our current schedule tomorrow is 11 a.m. to 1. We can start at 10 and then accommodate Mr. Palasek at that time, but I ask the will of the committee, would you rather come back here after the votes tonight, or would you rather commence at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning? Mr. Whalen, do you have any sense from your side?
I think we prefer to start tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Tomorrow morning?
Except
I see nods all around.
Except there is the matter of the statements on the floor regarding remembrance day.
I know, and that's the difficulty. That's why originally I wanted to start a little later.
We'll be fine, because I've got committee tomorrow, so I'll be. If we start at 10, I'll be 45 minutes late.
Yeah, well, if you know, as in any conflict, if you can find replacements, that would be beneficial. I would prefer not to start at 10 because there are remembrance statements by all parties. However, I don't think we've got another alternative. So, Mr. Palasak, if you can hear me, then your appearance will be at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you, sir. You're certainly welcome to stay for this. But now, Mr. Chopra, thank you very much for your patience. I think you know how things work around here. You've been before this committee enough times. We'll ask for a brief opening statement, followed by questions by committee members. Mr. Chopra, for 5 minutes or less, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, I think it was a 10-minute opening statement.
That would be fine.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for... Is the microphone on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, it is.
I would like to thank the members of the committee for inviting us back here. I'm once again accompanied by our Chief Financial Officer, Wayne Cheeseman, and our Vice President of Government Relations and Policy, Susan Margulies. I'll start with a few remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. Last time we met, you were about to embark on a cross-country journey to talk to Canadians about the future of postal service. Over the last few weeks, you've heard a lot about Canada Post. You've seen the size, the scope, and complexity of our vast network in urban, rural, and remote communities. You've met a number of our employees who work hard to serve Canadians and are proud to do so. You have talked with people who really count on postal service. As you witnessed, we are important to so many Canadians for many different reasons. For some, the Postal Service still provides an important connection to their community and to the rest of the country. For others, the Postal Service is crucial to their business and to the people they employ. You learned that countless charities rely on Canada Post to raise much-needed funds. This is an incredibly important institution with over 250 years of history. We're not perfect, but Canadians still value the service we provide and the effort it takes to make it happen every day. You have seen the challenges facing Canada Post up close. You have heard from many Canadians who are counting on us to secure a strong future of their postal service, and therefore we must get it right. You have been asked to put forward recommendations that will not only shape Canada Post and the services we provide to Canadians, they must also ensure the institution is on a solid financial footing for generations to come. As I stated when we first met, the challenges facing the corporation are large. The solutions to them must match the enormity of the challenge. The task force studied the situation and confirmed that the need for transformation, need to transform the business, is urgent and indisputable. The amount of mail in Canada has been declining every year for the last decade. Domestic letter mail volumes have declined 32%. Almost a third of our business has evaporated from their peak and will continue to do so. While understanding the massive impact this decline is having on Canada Post is easy, unfortunately, there are no easy solutions or silver bullets to fix the postal system. There is also no one-size-fits-all solution that will work in urban, rural, and remote communities. But the good news is that Canadians clearly understand that the postal system needs to change. That's what the task force found in their research as well. Canadians want Canada Post to continue to provide an important public service while remaining financially viable. To do that, we need to increase revenues while reducing our costs. You've heard some ideas to grow revenues over the last few weeks. The task force also looked at an extensive list of potential options before narrowing it down to the suggestions in the report. I can tell you that at Canada Post we have looked at and will continue to look at any idea that could grow revenue. Finding the best options is not always easy, but we have had the most success when we ask three simple questions. Is it something Canadians want? Is it something we're good at? Will it add new revenue above and beyond any new costs? One such example would be our strategic decision to leverage the power of our core delivery business to help kickstart e-commerce for Canadians, small, medium, or large businesses. We're definitely good at it. In fact, we deliver 2 out of every 3 parcels Canadians order online. Canadians want more parcels every day. 8 in 10 Canadians now shop online, and they're doing so more often. As for new revenue, parcel revenue alone has jumped by more than $400 million since 2011. almost $500 million in few short years. It is no small feat for any corporation, let alone a crown corporation, to grow a revenue in $500 million in such a short period of time. We achieved this growth by doing more than delivering parcels. We work closely with Canadian companies to understand their changing needs and deliver innovative solutions that are relevant to them. When they succeed, we succeed. Revenue growth is key to securing the future of Postal Service. The difficult but equally necessary part is reducing our costs. Most Canadians understand that the size of the organization needs to change to reflect the new realities of the digital world. But they don't want to see Canada Post employees laid off or lose their jobs. Neither do we. But we must acknowledge that labor represents 70% of our total costs. According to Ernst & Young's analysis completed for the task force, our labor costs are 41% higher than those of comparable businesses in private sector. As we transition from mail-centric service to a parcel-centric service, that's who we are competing with. At the same time, we have a mature workforce. The average age of our employees is 49. A large percentage of our employees, over 16,000 of them, are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. That means significant and necessary changes can be made to the postal system without the need for layoffs. That's very important. We can achieve the smaller workforce we need through attrition. In fact, even if we implemented every single suggestion put forward by the task force, we would still be hiring people every year at Canada Post. Canada Post will continue to be one of the country's largest employers for years to come. This approach is respectful to our employees. It allows them to retire knowing we are making the necessary changes to secure the company they helped to build and will depend on for their retirement. It also respects our collective agreements and the job security provisions for our employees. But as you can see, the window to take advantage of attrition at Canada Post is relatively small. The task force highlighted this in their discussion paper, and it said, Canada Post must realign and streamline operations during this time frame in order to take full advantage of this attrition window. This adds urgency to the work that you're doing to help define the postal service of the future. I would also point out that reducing the workforce to align the future realities must continue at all levels in the organization. Since 2008, Canada Post's overall workforce has been reduced by more than 15%. While the management represents about 5% of our employees, as a group, it is 20% smaller today than it was in 2008. Reducing costs requires change, and change is never easy. Canadians are ready for change, but they expect a healthy level of consultation to ensure we get it right. Finding common ground will be incredibly important as we move forward. We understand the expectations on Canada Post are high, and we are committed to doing a good job. To see what's possible when we leverage the power of this incredible institution, you just have to look at how Canada Post delivers the holiday season. This is the time of the year when Canada Post is at its best. We're already deep into our plans, knowing that the growth in e-commerce means Canadians are counting on us like never before. Parents and grandparents are depending on us to deliver their holiday shopping. Thousands of retail businesses are betting on us to make their holiday season a success. But it's not just about parcels. We will be proudly delivering every Christmas card and help Santa respond to over 1 million letters from Canadian children. We will deliver thousands of catalogs, coupons, promotional samples from all kinds of businesses. We will also help facilitate the transfer of funds at our post offices from new Canadians to their families around the world. The postal system matters to this country, but it needs to change. If we do this right, it will remain a strong and relevant contributor to the lives and livelihoods of Canadians for years to come. The work you're doing is incredibly important. On behalf of everyone at Canada Post, I would like to thank you for your efforts. We'll take some questions now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chopra. We'll start with a 7-minute round of questions with Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mr. Chopa and your management team for joining us again today. We've had the opportunity to listen to many Canadians across the country over the past 4 weeks, and certainly in the 22 cities we were able to visit, we learned a lot. What we have heard from Canadians is slightly at odds, it seems, from what the Consultation Canada Post undertook a few years ago seems to have heard. And we also heard about your consultations and whether or not people felt they were listened to or spoken to. Be that as it may, one of the things that we heard was around optimistic view versus pessimistic views of the corporation. We heard that a desire for a service focus, more of a desire on revenues and growing the parcel business and responding to those business needs, and less of a concern from Canadians so much further on the cost cutting. Another area where we heard a differential view, from my perspective, than the corporation was around the need for seniors and disabled people to access community mailboxes. I guess back in the 2013 timeframe, you'd mentioned that people wanted to get out and about. We did not hear that from seniors and disabled people. They want to be accommodated. And so my first question is really, if, as we heard, 20% of families face some type of a disability or a mobility issue in their home, how much will it cost to roll out a full accommodation plan, not just to the community mailboxes that are proposed or recently changed, but to the existing community mailboxes that exist in suburban Canada, and how the corporation would intend to deal with something like that?
As you know, that the community mailbox program has been around for 30, 35 years. And over the years, we have evolved in our accommodation programs to suit the changing needs of Canadian population as the demographics and the needs have changed. The ideas for extra keys, the ideas for early stage accommodations came along in the first decade, and then in the second decade, we introduced, working with special communities and disabled communities, more ideas. For example, when the communities asked for a lower mailbox because of their disability, that was an accommodation that evolved over time. Particularly in the last little while, we have introduced a very robust accommodation program. And what we learned from that experience was that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to accommodation. And we have now worked a program which, in fact, we communicated with every single household that was impacted in our last round of changes of community mailboxes. Could we have communicated more? Could we have communicated better? For sure, you can always do more. But my colleague here, Susan, led the entire initiative from start to bring our accommodation program to the next level, and I'll ask her to elaborate on that a little bit more. But to assure you that the accommodation program was never intended for a select group of new changeovers. Our accommodation program has always been open to anyone with any type of...
Chopra, in terms of costs, is there a certain point at which percentage of the population being accommodated would mean that the decision should really be just to offer door-to-door service to everyone? Because that would be more cost-effective than a fifth or a sixth of the doors being serviced on an accommodated basis.
I think what I would say is that if you look at other services that municipalities and government agencies accommodate for, whether it's wheels trans or whether it's the parking spots and so on, all of our homework showed that if the percentages, whether it's in the stat scan and the percentages that we look at in other similar programs, hold true to similar numbers, which would make sense because those are, we think the program is still very, very valid and very affordable.
So in suburban neighborhoods, you talk about, $80 million savings based on for 800,000 changeovers, and in the urban areas, you're talking about $32 million savings for the same volume of changeovers. Does that number include the accommodation built in, and that number discounted for accommodations that you would have to provide?
Yes, we have accommodations built in for the trend line that we have seen in our recent experience.
With respect to pensions, another thing that we heard is that from experts who appeared before the panel is that there's different opportunities to help decouple the pension risk from the financials and also decouple the pension risk from the labor negotiations through a couple of ways. One would be to have joint management of the plans, and that's one that we were focusing on a bit. And in addition to that idea of what your board and what you've done to try to push forward ways to do going concern accounting on the pension plan to alleviate that problem at the corporation, we've also heard that it's much more costly, certainly in markets like this, to change a plan from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. And so we'd like your thoughts on whether at this point, with markets offering very low returns, it's even a cost-effective move in today's market to switch from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. So both of those points I'd love to hear.
In fact, I'll ask my colleague here. Mr. Cheeseman has led the pension file extensively, and I'm sure he'll be able to share.
Just a little over a minute for a response.
Thank you. So in terms of the cost of transition, we've successfully transitioned our management employees in 2010. We've got a number of our unions that have transitioned, and so there is no significant cost to changing over. We're not here saying that moving to a DC for new employees is a total solution. We think there needs to be a very comprehensive solution for our pension plan, but it's much more than just getting rid of the solvency. I think things like looking at joint governance, but joint governance has to also include joint responsibility for the funding of the pension plan as well. And I think those are all good options to consider in terms of a comprehensive solution to the pension challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley for 7 minutes, please.
Welcome back. And this is for anyone. We've heard over last month a narrative, almost a narrative put forth that Canada Post has not been innovative in its business operations. It can't think out of the box on how to do operations. I wonder if any of the three of you could offer some comments on this, maybe give us an idea over the last several years, some of the innovations Canada Post has taken, not the community mailbox, but business innovations to increase revenue, reach out to grow the business, grow the parcel business.
Thank you. Innovation has been at the core of virtually everything we've been doing over the last 5 years. When you grow a business, which is roughly $1 billion business, to almost $1.6 billion that we're forecasting in our parcels business, and going against globally capitalized competitors like UPS, FedEx, and others, it requires a great amount of innovation. In 2013, we launched Deliver Tonight product, which is the first of its kind in Canada, where consumers can order a product by noon, or in some cases by 1 o'clock, and have it at their door by 6 p.m. That was a revolutionary service which we've since then launched in Vancouver and Montreal. In 2014, we launched Flex Delivery, late 2014. That allows almost 40% of Canadian families that are two-income families that are not home during daytime to have their package delivered to a post office of their choice, any one of the over 6,000 locations. The one that's most convenient to their work or most convenient to their home. On their way home, they can pick it up. We have already delivered over 250,000 packages in a short period of launch that we did in the early stages. We have been innovating by partnering with some of the leading edge companies like Shopify to make it easier for small businesses to use Canada Post as their carrier. If you open a store at Shopify platform, or for that matter, many other platforms, you never have to speak to anybody at Canada Post, and you're instantly enabled to offer the entire suite of Canada Post services, including track and trace, including analytics on their business, and best prices for small businesses are automatically enabled if they were to go and partner with any of the retail platforms. We introduced last year the most innovative idea in the concept store, in our retail store, where it's the North America's first drive-through parcel pickup center. Again, Canadians are leading busy lives. When you look at young moms with kids in the car seat and it's winter and it's snowing, they don't have to take them out of the car and go pick up a package or visit the post office. They can use a drive-through capability. In fact, that was very well received in our first concept store in Richmond Hill, Ontario. We're now rolling out in a few other locations. And much of our innovation has come from employee ideas and business ideas and retailers, companies that are pure play online players who have no store. We are offering our retail stores.
Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned employee ideas, customer ideas. Do you have a couple you could elaborate on?
The
I feel
idea
like this
for
is Jeopardy, but
yeah, the idea for both flex delivery and deliver tonight came from our employees who were interacting with the customers, asking large retailers, what could we do differently for you that will help you grow your business? And they asked for a pilot to do a same product such as the deliver tonight. In fact, that one required extensive collaboration with Canadian Union of Postal Workers. In fact, I applaud their cooperation on bringing that idea to life because we needed a different cost structure. In a very competitive environment, when you're launching an idea, you need collaboration, and if that idea takes off, yes, you can grow with it. So those are examples of the employee ideas. But Shopify came to us in 2011 for the first time. In fact, we talk to them virtually every day on the idea of making it easy for small businesses to deal with Canada Post. They said, we have made it easier for them to get their PayPal account, to do a checkout engine, to do credit card acceptance. Why can't we make it easier for them to conduct commerce through Canada Post without having to open an account with Canada Post, without having to get a price structure with Canada Post? It is now a seamless process. When you open an online store at $25 a month for Shopify, you get Canada Post built in. Those type of ideas have come from innovative, bleeding-edge companies that are redefining the retail for Canadians. So I think innovation, and we have $500 million of revenue to show for it. So this has been a remarkable journey of collaborating with small businesses, large businesses, employees, our unions, and showing a really great result in an area that is highly competitive.
A couple quick questions because it's short on time. The money that you make from regular stamp, regular mail DM, I guess you call it, versus parcels, am I understanding correct that the profit level on a DM is much higher per dollar than on parcel, which is why we see even though parcel revenue rising rapidly, it's not offsetting the profit loss?
The cost of our network, the cost of our all of our lines of businesses are allocated and audited, and we have had a cost study, an independent audited cost study that has been verifying the lines of business and our cost allocations, and they are absolutely following the rules, and they comply with all of the requirements for our cost allocations, and in fact, each of the lines of businesses stand on their own feet.
So the increase in parcel revenue, you have an equal amount of drop in DM revenue.
Maybe I can.
No.
But, you know,
I think you're referring to you're referring to transaction mail.
transaction mail versus parcel delivery.
Yeah, I think two very different dynamics are playing out in the market. Transaction mail is declining because more and more Canadians are using.
But I'm wondering about the profit per dollar for each.
Sorry, go ahead. Wayne.
So the profit per dollar, what we call the contribution margin, would be much higher for transaction mail than
Right, that's
parcels.
what I was asking, yes.
Yes.
I should have just gone to Mr. Cheeseman to start.
Weir for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. Canada Post has reported a profit of $45 million in the first 2 quarters of this year. Typically, the fourth quarter is the most profitable for Canada Post with Christmas cards and parcels. How do you square these facts with the task force prediction that Canada Post will lose money this year?
In fact, as learning from my previous question, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague here, Chief Financial Officer.
So first of all, what I would say to you is it's very challenging to do forecasting at Canada Post when you have $6 billion of revenue, $6 billion of cost, you've got $12 billion, and you're trying to put a needle in, do I make $50 million a year, $100 million a year, or a $50 million loss? So that is very challenging in our business. Our forecasting is very solid. In fact, our average forecasting accuracy is about 3% of our revenue cost base. I look at anything less than 50 million, 75 million is really rounding. I would say this year we're probably going to be in a situation for the year where we could probably make $50 million of profit, or lose $50 million. Just an example of the size of the organization, we just were successful in a CPAA arbitration case on post-retirement benefits that we will be reporting in our third quarter results. That was worth $44 million to us. It's non-cash, one time, but that will be reported in our results. So when you're down talking plus or minus $100 million, when you're dealing with $6 billion of revenue, $6 billion of costs, $22 billion of assets.
I take the point that it's hard to predict, but knowing what we know now, that Canada Post did make $45 million in the first half of the year, and it's probably going to make a lot of money in the fourth quarter of the year, do you think it's reasonable to expect the corporation will be profitable in 2016?
So what I've said is that I think now, using my crystal ball, we could be $50 million profitable, in the range of $50 million profitable, $50 million loss.
So could you lay out the scenario for the $50 million loss? Like Canada Post is going to lose a couple $100 million in the third quarter?
Well, so $50 million loss would mean that we move from $45 million to, for the back half of the year, we would be $100 million. I don't know what's going to happen to discount rates. So
okay, but if you're making money in the fourth quarter, that would involve a huge loss in the third quarter, wouldn't
so
it?
not to get into too much detail, but there are obligations that we have on our balance sheet, obligations that are depending, the valuations depends on discount rates. So whatever the discount rate, if the discount rate is low at the end of the year, it's decided on one day, December 31st. Whatever the rate is, that impacts what our costs and our savings are.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to turn things over to Karine Trudel.
Alors bonjour, tout d'abord, excusez aux membres du comité.
Good afternoon. Welcome. I'd like to apologize to the committee members for our absence. We had Olympic members of the Olympic team who came to see us in the House. I have a young judoka from my constituency who won a bronze medal, and I did want to congratulate him. So I'd like to apologize to the committee members. Thank you, Mr. Chopra, Mr. Cheeseman, and Ms. Maglis. In your speech, in your statement, Mr. Chopra, and the previous time as well, you talked about the total wages. This is something that has come up quite regularly in the positions taken by Canada Post. And for our analysis, I'd like to know whether you can provide a figure about what the total salaries are for the upper management of Canada Post, because we talk about the payroll for the employees of Canada Post, but we'd like to make a comparison with the upper management levels of the corporation as well.
Last committee hearing, that the management payroll is in the range of $200 million, $220 million, and management accounts for less than 5% of the workforce, and this is in relation to almost $3 billion of payroll that the total corporation has.
Mais lorsque vous parlez, là, vous parlez.
Here you're talking in percentages. There were fewer supervisors and 22 vice presidents with Canada Post, I believe, if the situation is unchanged. One president and 22 vice presidents?
In vice presidents.
Puis, mais par rapport au pourcentage.
In relation to percentages, you're talking here about upper management. We would expect then to be a smaller number of these in relation to the total employees. In pro rata, could you give us an idea of, could you tell us the total amount rather than percentage?
As I mentioned, you have many questions. One is, are the 17 vice presidents appropriate for the size of the organization? We have an organization of 60,000 employees, probably one of the top 10 postal administrations around the world, a business that covers coast to coast to coast, with 3 different lines of businesses. We have over 16,000 vehicles. We have over 15 million addresses that we cover. There is $6 billion of cost structure that gets managed. We have the largest transportation network. We use the largest air transportation network. So when you look at the complexity, whether it's sales or marketing, whether it's engineering, whether it's managing transportation network or procurement or finance, an organization of this size as a consolidated revenue of $8 billion requires the best talent. And in order to manage and organize in a way that functions have the right leadership at the top that provides them the best guidance, you need a structure that we believe is the right structure for the corporation. And
Thank you. We'll go to Madame Ratanzi for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chopra. And for your benefit, I brought this so that I can understand where you're coming from. You know, this is an interesting. It's an interesting juxtaposition. We want to ensure that what we heard from the field and what we heard from you, we have to do a gap analysis now. And what we heard from the field, and we heard from ENY as well, and they too are not very they were not very confident that their figures of $700 million in the 10th year is viable. But, you know, things change, environments change. Also, the financial statements showed top management at $650 million. But if that's the wrong one, maybe you can correct me later. And so they are incongruents, and I just want to see how we can assist change management. You say change management, and change management is very important. Did you have change champions, both from the management and labor, to take the vision over, to say that this is the vision for Canada Post? Did you have such a group? Just a yes or no.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And they were functioning? They were functioning well, because we heard from QPW that A, there was no consultation, and B, that their ideas were never taken into consideration, that they had very good ideas, but they were not taken into consideration.
Okay, I think it deserves a little bit longer than a yes or no answer. So let me give you the context. With our unions, all of our unions, we meet on revenue and financials, we meet on technical changes, and we meet on health and safety issues. At the very high level, twice a year with all unions, we meet what is known as a semi-annual financial update. Senior leadership of the union and senior leadership of Canada Post sits across the table. We tell them what's going on in our business, what the challenges we're facing. And then all of the revenue ideas that we're considering, as I mentioned earlier in one of my answers, the delivered tonight product would have never materialized if it was not in consultation with Canadian Union of Postal Workers, which is a great breakthrough for us to be able to try something that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to afford. On changes, if you're making a change anywhere in our operations, there are constant consultations going on at regional, at local, at national level. We have local health and safety committees, the LJOSH and national committees. And in terms of revenue ideas, the recent discussion we had with our unions, which led to solving for a weekend delivery. Weekend deliveries are something that Canadians are asking for. So we have found common ground on many areas.
Okay, fair enough. So this is your chance to really rebut whatever we heard from the field. Or we don't have to buy everything they say, and we don't have to buy everything you say, right? We have to do a gap. So the assessment that we heard from academics and other businesses was Canada Post lacks vision, that management lacks vision. Now, you're from Pitney Bowes, and Pitney Bowes has been reinventing itself. You were there, reinvented it. What are some of the factors that are preventing you from reinventing Canada Post in areas that will generate revenue? For example, we were told you unilaterally said no to postal banking, despite the fact that when we spoke to Oliver Weinman and ENY, they had not even done a review of the Australian model, which is so similar to the Canadian situation. So if you could give me your thoughts on it, please.
2 points to that. I'm going to ask my colleague to answer the banking question first, and then I'll answer your question on the vision and our ability to grow.
So certainly on banking, we looked at banking. We've, over the years, we had a couple of pilots on banking many, many years ago. The second one ended in 2006. Coming out of the 2008 economic recession, where we lost almost 20% of our assets in our pension plan, it was a general worldwide economic recession. In 2009, we lost $300 million in revenue on a year-over-year basis. We were looking at opportunities to improve our self-sustainability. One of the areas we looked at, it wasn't the only one of the areas we looked at was banking, and we did some reviews of that. And as we've
Bank areas did you look at? What geographical context did you look at?
So it looked nationally across the country, and it was retail banking.
Okay.
And what we found when we looked at sort of the analysis, what we realized is that the risk that we were taking on from a financial and reputational view was not worth looking after the potential benefits. So on a cost-benefit...
So that's where, sorry, I'll have to stop you because there's 2 minutes and I think Mr. Chopra needs to answer a question. But that's where they say you did not look at tactics from outside, internationally, like an Australia bank, because all the postal offices across the globe have faced what you're facing. So I'll leave it at that and let Mr. Chopra answer that question.
In terms of innovation, I think if you talk to our customers, if you look at the retail innovation that we have been part of, and in fact, proof is in the pudding, as you would always say, you would have not been able to grow a business by $500 million when you are competing in a highly competitive marketplace if you're not innovating. As I mentioned earlier on to Mr. McCauley's questions, that Deliver Tonight, Flex Delivery, drive-through retail concept stores, self-serve, and fully integrated products with Shopify or Magento or IBM platforms. These are innovative products that none of our competition offers at that level. And we continue to do that. In fact, this is not a one-time job. And in fact, we believe that there are ways to reinvent Canada Post, and one of them is e-commerce, which plays to our strengths, and we're winning in that space.
So I have a last question, which is a sensitive question, and that is, as a civil servant, when a government is changed, would you follow the mandate of the government? Because we were at a place where we really got hammered because community mailboxes were put in 6 days after the election. So could you answer that, please? Because there is this perception that you were following the previous government's mandate of dismantling Canada Post or privatizing.
CMB program is a large infrastructure program. A program of this size, as you know, we converted 840,000 addresses in the period that we were implementing those. And the process is almost an 8-9 month process of planning, construction, delivery, and ultimately reassigning employees to their new routes where they'll be delivering. And this is something you cannot stop in 6 days. In fact, we had a plan, out of our overall plan, we were able to stop 2/3 of the addresses that were scheduled out of respect for the mandate of the new government. 1/3 were in the stage that had to be implemented to avoid disruption of service.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Clark.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here. We very much appreciate it. My first question for you, Mr. Chopra, can you tell me whether Canada Post is a national symbol of unity, federal unity?
Brands and institutions for Canadians, indeed.
OK, merci. Et puis j'allais oublier, juste rectifier.
And there was something I was going to forget. I'd like to rectify something. The Conservative government never gave a mandate to Canada Post to dismantle anything. I wouldn't agree with my colleague on this point. My second question for you, Mr. Chopra, and I'm asking this respectfully, even it's for your own benefit that I'm putting this question so that you can defend yourself in this committee throughout our travels. This is something that was raised on many occasions. That you supposedly have a hidden agenda. The unions of Canada Post claim that you have an ideological stance that is carrying out a certain privatization of Canada Post. And I'd like to know what you have to say in relation to these types of claims that were made on many occasions. And I'm giving you here a possibility to express your view here in the...
That I was given when I was hired by the board of directors was to run a financially self-sustainable Canada Post as a great institution. And it was at crossroads where the mail volumes were declining, and it was facing, in fact, a serious challenge. The mission at no point has been to do anything other than to run an efficient, profitable, self-sustaining postal institution. In fact, I would like to say we have done a good job of doing that and carrying out that mission. If you look at our business, our letter mail business is about $3 billion, and it's declining at about 6% a year. That's $180 million that we lose from day one. We know that it's going to happen. If you take a 2% inflation in our cost structure of $6 billion, that's about $120 million. So the day we start, on January 1st, we know we're facing a challenge of roughly $300 million. And if you look at our track record over the last 5 years, after facing some challenges in 2011 and 12, we have managed to turn the business around. It is profitable. It has a growth agenda. It has an innovation agenda. It has a transformational agenda. And it's now going through a period where your committee is reviewing what its mandate should be. And that remains our sole purpose, is to deliver the postal mandate that we have been asked to do.
Et puis, M. Chopra, aujourd'hui, on est 3 ans plus tard.
Mr. Chopra, 3 years later, I'm talking about 3 years after the 5-point plan was applied, started being applied, you've been able to see what the reaction of Canadians has been, certain interest groups and the political parties as well. Today, 2nd of November 2016, if this were to be done again, would you carry out the 5-point plan in the same way, or would there be certain aspects that you would take away or that you would add to it?
Scale change, which is a multi-year, 5, 6, 7-year project. You start off and you learn and you improve. It is no different than a large IT deployment, a large infrastructure deployment, or transforming a 253-year-old institution that is literally facing its existential problem with the decline of the sole purpose that it served for almost 200 years, almost 240 of the 253 years, which was to deliver letter mail. And I think when you put that in the context of our current phase, every step of the way, even the first 6 months were harder than the next 6 months, and the following 6 months. We learned every step of the way. I'll give you an example of when we deployed our community mailboxes in certain communities. In municipalities where we had, in fact, Madam Margulies led the municipal engagement project and personally attended numerous municipal committee meetings and municipal and public meetings where we had collaboration. We found better solutions. We moved almost 25% of the locations based on the input from communities, based on the input from municipalities, where we had collaboration. So we learned every step of the way. Our accommodation program got better when we learned new needs for Canadians. Our communication program got better as we understood that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. No 2 streets are the same. So I think we have constantly been learning, and that will continue to be the case. I think any good organization needs to learn and improve and continue to learn from those lessons. And I think we will deploy all of the new learnings into our future changes.
Thank you. Our final intervention will be Monsieur Ayoub. 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mr. Ayoub, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. In our tour of Canada, this examination of Canada Post, we learned a great many things. And I'd like to focus more particularly on labor relations. Relations with the unions, with employees and management. Labor relations as a way of advancing. My observation, and I don't know whether you will agree with this, is that there is a very significant gap in being able to achieve a common goal. The common goal does not seem to be shared. And the vision for change that you have presented, and it's never easy, does not seem to be shared in any way. It seemed to be unanimous view. I didn't find anywhere in Canada where there was an agreement with the way this change was being carried out. How can you bring about a change such as this without the agreement of the union?
It is a very important question for an institution where unions are as much part of the solution to our future as management's ideas would be. Let me start by saying that our unions and us, we both agree that we have a problem. There is no denying, and I'm sure they will appear before you after us, and you'll hear from CUPW. We both agree that Canada Post is facing a significant challenge on its pension issues and on its business model. But we do disagree on how to address this monstrous, this big challenge. I'll agree with you. There are two different visions of how we transform the business. There is a view that no element of any cost should be touched in order to transform the business. It is very difficult. It is very difficult for a corporation that was built and is serving the needs of the 19th and 20th century to serve the needs of the 21st century. We have to change. I can't think of one organization, one business that has not been disrupted through the internet. And the closest neighbors of our businesses are publishing industry, newspaper industry, book industry. And I don't have to tell you what's going on in those places. So the answer lies in finding common ground on both revenues, where we believe we have lots of collaboration. As I mentioned, weekend deliveries, larger sizes of direct mail, and delivered tonight, these are innovations that we work together with the union. But on the cost side, there are two different visions. There are two different views. And we have to find, pension is a great example. It's $8 billion solvency deficit. Even on a going concern basis, if there's a market crash, you'll be down 20%. So there are serious differences.
Est-ce que ce qui est différent, la différence?
The differences and the differences in understanding, that is in continuing to provide quality service. Would it be the fact that no jobs are to be lost on the part of the union, a resistance to the loss of a drop in the total number of employees? Does this seem to be the trigger or the basis of this refusal on the part of the union, or would it be something to do with the working conditions or the pension?
For the union about, you will hear from them directly, but I think it is a view that anything that affects the costs should not be touched. So, and I have often used an extreme example that if we do nothing, the last letter that we will deliver will cost Canadians $3 billion. And as letters keep declining, they're down 1/3.
On n'arrivera pas jusque-là.
We won't go that far.
It's a difficult issue. I understand it's a difficult issue. But we must acknowledge that technology and changes require all organizations, not just Canada Post, media companies, manufacturing, and you look at virtually any industry that is being disrupted by digital technology, we are no different. And we must change with times, and we have been very, very diligent. And that's why I mentioned in my remarks, we have 16,000 employees retiring. And the most respectful way of dealing with this change is through attrition. And that has been something we have done successfully in the past.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chopra, I want to thank you on behalf of the committee, for you and your management team, for appearing before us once again today. I also want to thank you for your kind comments in your opening remarks about the work this committee is doing. I can assure you that over the last month, this committee has done extraordinary work in consulting with Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And I can also assure you on behalf of this committee that the final report, whenever it is tabled in Parliament, will be absolutely reflective of what we've heard, and I'm quite confident that the recommendation this committee comes up with will be in the best interest of both consumers and the corporation itself.
Mr. Chair, I would like to echo what you just said in a slightly different way. The committee's work is so important at this stage in our journey. I think you are the ones who are going to, you've talked to Canadians, and we do share a common goal. Serving Canadians and having an institution survive for another 250 years is as important to this committee and to this country as it is to us. I think we all will do our very best and contribute and serve, and then the next generation will take over. But I think we share your pain and your joy as you go through this. But I think we have a common goal, and we'll do anything we can to support.
I thank you for that, and well said, sir. We are suspended until the next group of witnesses comes to the table. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have everyone take their seats as quickly as possible.
I'm being told that the reason that we don't have a room to look at the documents for
Colleagues, for your attentiveness. Thank you, Ms. McCauley. I was hoping we hadn't missed anyone. So,
Be far down.
all right. To our witnesses, thank you for your appearance here today. I believe all of you are very familiar on how the process works. Now, since I believe all of you have appeared before us before, normally we would give 5 minutes for brief opening statements. You still have that if you wish. However, that would curtail the amount of questions, time we have for questions, because the bells will start ringing in less than an hour, and we will have to adjourn at that time. So I would ask all of you, if you have an open statement, please, if you could, curtail that to just new information perhaps that you haven't presented before, or if needed, just a re-emphasis of some of the most priority items that you wish to present. Otherwise, we'll be running out of time. And with that, we will start with Ms. McCauley.
Okay. Well, my name's Brenda McCauley. I'm a postmaster. I worked in a post office for 18 years. With me today is my co-worker, Daniel Mayhew, is presently the Vice President of the Canadian National Postmasters and Assistants Association, and Daniel's also a postmaster as well. We represent our members who work in 3,260 rural post offices across Canada, and our members consist of 95% women. Once again, thank you for giving CPA a second opportunity to express our views. We do value all your efforts the committee has put forward and will continue to put forward. When we were last here, there were questions that were asked of the panel that due to time restraints, CPA did not have a chance to respond, and we would like to take the opportunity to do so now. One of the questions that Francis Druin posted was, would our members need to have certified financial planning training if we had postal banking? Well, to respond to that, I would say no, and I'll tell you why. When Canada Post partnered with the Bank of Montreal in 1999 or 1997, they partnered for a 2-year pilot. The pilot was so successful, it went on to July 2013. So the way that looked for 16 years was it was so successful that all the community members had bank accounts, and they would do the day-to-day transactions in the post office. Now, if anybody wanted to do a mortgage or any kind of special investments, if there was paperwork that needed to be provided, the clerk at the post office would provide the paperwork, and if they wanted to do a mortgage, then the postmaster would let the bank manager know that, and then the bank manager, of course, would come to town once a month and service all the needs of the community. And that went on for 16 successful years. And the reason, I understand from all the minutes of the meetings, was that Canada Post pulled out because the banking hours were not supported for the workers. So the workers were torn between, am I a post office or a bank? Now, had those banking hours been supported, it would have been very successful and would continue to be successful. And with that said, the Bank of Nova Scotia also partnered in a community in Newfoundland. 2-year pilot was successful. It went on for 4 years. And Bank of Montreal also partnered in Moose Factory, and the 2-year pilot went on for 8 years. So, in the task force report on page 86, it stated Canada Post piloted partnerships with a couple of banks in the late 1990s did not succeed. Well, just from what I've explained to you, CPA has a different perspective. Another question was, the task force report states, in essence, the post office could become the community hub. What services could be added? CPA believes that the post office is the community hub now and always has been. Having personally worked there for 18 years, when people are looking for information, whether it is to do with taxes, pension forms, passports, directions, assisting seniors with various needs, you name it, the post office is the place to stop for the information. The task force suggested of having a business sense center with the availability of internet would just increase the traffic and potentially generate revenues for Canada Post. It would also continue to drive growth in rural Canada. Our offices can become the financial engine for social and economic development in rural Canada. It could also be the information reference center for federal government departments. For example, information and/or forms on the following services could be made available to improve commercial and customer traffic. Postal banking and more financial services could be offered, social insurance number kits, employment insurance applications, Canada Pension Plan applications, old age security applications, passports, specialized income tax forms. Now we have the general tax form. Often people would come in because they're looking for the specialized forms, student loans. Anyway, the list goes on. We could also partner with the province, motor vehicle registration and renewals, driver's license, insurance renewals, fishing, hunting, marriage license, etc. All right. Okay. This is when I say in closing. So despite the moratorium being in place, we have seen over 350 public post offices close. We have also seen public post office replaced with privatized franchises. As per point 3 of the previous government-supported 5-point action plan, it appears Canada Post is still promoting franchises. Since 2010, we have seen a drastic reduction of service to our communities, with 800,000 hours removed from our public post offices. There have been over 500 good-paying jobs with benefits lost. Our members are 95% women, and there are very few living wage jobs in rural Canada. Just recently, we heard Bill Morneau announce the creation of a new infrastructure bank. He stated, "We need to create good-paying jobs." Our question is, why can't we keep the good-paying jobs we already have? By investing in the infrastructure that is already in place, let's build up this public corporation, not tear it down.
Mr. Perdue.
Thanks. So to the chair's point, I'll definitely keep it brief. I believe we articulate our position at the last time when provided the opening statement as well through our written submission, so I won't be covering that part, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. In terms of an opening statement, at least I'd like to thank the committee for, again, the second invitation. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to at least provide our thoughts and concerns regarding the discussion paper or even the Canada Post review process. In terms of process, there were some concerns. Personally, I don't feel like our ideas were necessarily really considered by the task force. There's a number of ideas that didn't appear in the paper whatsoever. And we also think that it would have been beneficial to have essentially an employee representative on the task force. I'm not too sure how the task force representatives were selected or named, but there would have been value to have some form of balance on the task force, to have someone that's coming from labor, someone who has that history of as an employee representative, to provide their perspective on certain issues. We also feel that throughout the document, it appears that the task force would have had multiple conversations with the corporation. From one perspective, I understand that. From the other perspective, when you're trying to build an objective document, it doesn't necessarily look good, I think, when you're getting a lot of information from one of the stakeholders, and that the other stakeholders, being the unions, only get one opportunity to provide their perspective on the issues. So those were some areas of concerns. In terms of the roadmap, I think we've raised that before. We believe this to be, we talked about privatization. The way that it's written, it's almost like a roadmap to the eventual privatization of the corporation, just with the amount of outsourcing that would be involved in some of the things that the task force brings forward. Also, a significant job loss, so elimination of many jobs, not just for the current incumbents, but also removing those jobs from the labor market. So they'll have an impact on the economy. That's going to have an impact on future generations as well. You're eliminating those jobs completely from the working economy. The other concern that we had, of course, is around pension plan. The pension was discussed. Position that the unions took was exactly one that I believe that Mr. Cheeson spoke to briefly, and the option we brought forward essentially is seeking permanent solvency exemption. That would require some legislative change. I don't believe it's an option that's discussed through the task force discussion paper, but certainly one that we brought forward to Mr. Foote, went to Bill Morneau, and it's something that we certainly would want to explore further, or for the committee to actually at least consider. And so if you have any questions, Howie and I are both here to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you, and I'm sure there will be several questions. Finally, we have Monsieur Dubois.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for the invitation to participate on this process. I would like first to present and introduce my colleague, Michael Ling, first Vice President for the association. Let me start by saying that the association supports some of the 5 action plan from Canada Post. We agree that with the corporation and the task force that in some way we need to evolve. We're in 2016, so something needs to happen. The association is a trade union and sees itself as having a very progressive approach to labor relations. We are a strong advocate of alternate dispute resolution, interest-based negotiation, consultation, and open dialogue. Our unique blend of broad-minded thinking and collaborative problem-solving places us in the distinctive position to assist the corporation in implementing some of the 5 action plan. In fact, our members have directly participated in a conversation of urban Canadian households receiving door-to-door mail delivery to less costly community mailbox. The corporation has placed this part of the 5-point action plan on pause, pending the result of the standing committee, and we are anxious to see the outcome of it. So, but beyond this initiative, we see a number of opportunity to further, for the future, of Canada Post, including leveraging of one of the largest retail network infrastructure. This network has served Canada as well as merging the rural with the urban, as well as the corporation fleet transportation network can be further leveraged to serve Canadians. The association can state unequivocally that the past success of Canada Post has been a direct byproduct of the work and contribution of all its employees. It is the association impression that any change to the corporation may result in a negative impact on the terms and conditions of employment of those employees. It is the association's belief that in order for the corporation to be successful, it must attract a high level of talent. This can only be achieved by providing attractive working conditions and employment, which must include good benefit and a strong pension plan for its employees. But we believe that we must be involved in the conversation. By way of example, in late 2013, the Honorable Mr. Flaherty spread heated government legislation which provide a 5-year exemption to Canada Post from the requirement to make payment to address the solvency deficit required under the Pension Benefit Standard Act. It appeared that his reprieve will come to an end and without any further resolution on the horizon. We unfortunately have not been part of those discussions. The association believes in the collaborative approach to seeking solutions to address the concern of all employees of Canada Post. This would include a consultation on how to assure the provision of a solid and fair retirement. It is the association view that a successful Canada Post result in content and thinking, thriving. Is that the proper word? Sorry. Yeah, thriving employee, which will benefit all Canadians. The association look forward to working with the corporation and participating in the mandate review process, particularly in light of the challenge and opportunity facing Canada Post Corporation today, and we believe we have a lot to offer. So long as we keep our focus and our goal to deliver quality and affordable postal service for Canadians and consult with each other, we believe that this can be achieved. Thank you, and I know my English is not as perfect as some of you, but I think everybody understood.
It was very good.
Thank you.
We'll start with our 7-minute rounds, and Madame Shanahan, 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to all the members of the panel for being here. When we were on the road, and I heard some interesting keywords, and we certainly heard them when we were on the road, collaboration being one, and also this working in flexibility and working in partnership as well. The pilot program with the banks. I'd like to explore that a little bit further with you, Mrs. McCauley. What was the format? Were there was it the postal workers themselves that were trained in the banking transaction? How did that work? Did you share space? What did the security look like?
Well, right now, we have security in the post office, and what that looked like was they'd have the wicket for the banking on one section, and the wicket for postal services on the other section, and all the postal workers in the post office were trained.
Something that we heard from the credit unions the other day was that they would be interested in exploring that kind of a partnership, but they want to be sure that it would be an open concept, and there is some concern about the post office crowding out the banking or credit union sector business. So that's something. What I like to hear is that people are open to considering that kind of business, and if there's a way to provide that service across the country in rural and remote areas where it doesn't exist, that's certainly something that's interesting to me. On the other side, though, is the importance of revenue growth, and to ensure revenue growth, we need to have flexibility in the delivery mechanisms. Something that we heard in places like Scanterbury and Yellowknife was that in one case, the standalone post office was only open 3 hours a day, so that wasn't serving anyone. And we actually saw it. It was quite small, and you couldn't fit more than half a dozen people in the post office. So they were moving to a grocery store concept. So in other words, because they were able to collaborate on this, they were able to find a solution that fit the community. How open are your members to finding different kinds of solutions to ensuring delivery both to individual Canadian customers and also to the businesses, the micro businesses that are also growing and need extended service hours?
As I was mentioning, our hours have been drastically reduced, and that's why you see those post offices only open 3 hours a day. And that really happened in 2013 under the 5-point action plan. There was a flood hour cuts that went across the country, 25%. But with that said, our members would be really excited about it, because right now they're doing basic banking anyway to a certain extent. That money orders, MoneyGrams, authenticating pins on credit cards, and our members are good at authenticating people because we know who the people are in the community, and so absolutely. There's so many few good-paying jobs with benefits for women in rural Canada, so they would be absolutely open to that. And as far as the security goes, to my knowledge, in all the minutes I've seen, there was never a break-in in Newfoundland in the 16 years they had the post office there.
Okay. Chair, how much time?
They had the bank there.
About 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes.
Okay, excellent. I'm just curious, Mr. West, you're here representing the Public Service Alliance of Canada. What is...
Yes,
The Union of Postal Communication Employees is a component, a sub-union of the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
Okay, because I wanted to hear your thoughts. Actually, something that we've heard a lot about is also the community hub, where we could leverage the postal offices across the country to provide these additional services, many of them that are being served now either by in-person Service Canada or online or telephone services. How feasible is that to be able to repurpose, or that's not to retrain people or to provide those services in an all-in-one community hub. And the reason why I say that is because a complaint that we had from some of the commercial retailers, e-commerce people that were using Canada Post to deliver their parcels is that, time is money and they couldn't afford to be waiting in line. They needed specialized commercial parcel services. That's where the money is. And they couldn't be waiting in line behind somebody that was trying to fill out a remittance or something else.
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I think that certainly the problem that you described goes to staffing levels, whether it's at a Canada Post office or a Service Canada office. If there aren't enough people on the front counter to provide the services, then you're going to have a queue. It only stands to reason. It's the same as at the grocery store. If you've only got one cash register open at the grocery store, then people are going to line up at that cash register, and the person at the back of the line is going to be less happy than the person at the front. In terms of where I thought your question was going initially, I do think that postal services would be better to handle some services that now are only provided by computer terminals in remote locations. For instance, employment insurance at Service Canada. They advertise that they have all kinds of places where that can happen. But really what they are is they have a computer terminal that someone can sit down in front of. And in a remote location, there's no guarantee that everyone really understands how to work that computer terminal. So more trained people to provide those employment insurance services that Canadians need, for instance, would be a good thing.
Monsieur Clark, 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour à tous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone for being present. I believe there's a French-Canadian among us. I believe we'll be able to have a good dialogue. Just before your arrival, Mr. Chopra was with us. I don't know if you ran into him when he left. I hope that he shook your hand. I just want to come back to one of the things that Mr. Chopra said that I'd like to confirm with you, ladies and gentlemen. The management and workers of Canada Post and different unions represented throughout Canada Post agree on the necessity that Canada Post must adjust and renew itself in the face of the difficulties of the 21st century without going into too much detail. Is it true that that element is something that is a source of mutual agreement between you and Mr. Chopra? I invite all of you to answer. Yes, we can agree on the matter that both the unions and management of Canada Post agree that there is a serious problem and that we must find solutions. On that point, I would say that for the first time in the history of Canada Post, after the announcement that Minister Flaherty made in 2013, the 4 unions of Canada Post agreed to meet together the corporation. And the corporation initially was resistant to that. We persisted, and we did meet the corporation altogether, all the unions, to say that we had a problem with the pension and we had to find a solution. After that, according to the directives, there was a special committee struck. This committee, personally, I didn't find it very productive. And I also think that Canada Post lacks transparency. The example I can give you is that I was chief negotiator for our association for the postmasters, and we were before the arbitrator on August 5th, and the deficit of the pension fund of $8.1 billion that Mr. Chopra used again today, that deficit on August 5th, we never heard anything about it, neither us nor the arbitrator. Mr. Chopra said that there was a problem with the pension fund, but do you agree that there's also a problem that Canada Post must renew itself in the face of a changing world and adapt to the way that Canadians are using Canada Post? Yes, we agree entirely with that. That's one of the things that the unions agree on, that, in the end, postal banking, and even in the report that was submitted to you, indicates that 7% of Canadians would definitely be in favor of opening a bank account at a post office. 7% of Canadians is a relatively large number. 22% of businesses said that they were interested as well. That is a relatively large number. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have many questions, and so I'll move on. Mr. Dubois, you mentioned that you support some of the 5 points. Which ones? Listen, I'll answer in French. Please go ahead. We participated in the implementation of the community mailboxes. When I say from day one, of course, increasing the cost of stamps, that might be a solution. According to the reports that you have, we have one of the countries that had the lowest rate. But now, listen, there are some things that were put forward that we weren't quite ready for. The biggest factor was the implementation of all community mailboxes. On that point, if I could offer some details, I would say that we don't all have the same vision among the different unions, but that is the future. It's changing, there's technology. It's true that houses are being built, and we need to be able to streamline things. And from the time that it's implemented, well, we were part of those discussions when it came to the developments as well. We cooperated with our employer to try to minimize impact at our level, of course. I'll move on, sir. Thank you very much. I'd like to come back to a question for everybody. Mr. Alupa, you're out of time. Was that 7 minutes? Time is fleeting.
Mr. Ware, 7 minutes. I'm sorry, yes, 7 minutes, please.
Thanks very much. The two hottest issues facing our committee have been the Phoenix payroll system and Canada Post. And since we have representatives from PSAC here, I'm inclined to suggest that perhaps we should enlist Canada Post to deliver paychecks to federal employees. Maybe we could get two birds with one stone. But my serious question to Mr. West is that most of the members that you represent are part of a federal public service pension plan that is not subject to solvency valuation because it's understood that the federal government is a going concern. Given that no one is proposing to privatize Canada Post, I wonder whether it makes any sense to subject its pension plan to solvency valuation.
I'm not an expert on pensions, Mr. Ware, so I think Francois could probably respond to that more because he's dealt significantly with the pensions for his members, if that's okay.
I'm not sure I understand the question. You're asking if whether or not the PSSA should be subject to the solvency test?
Well, I'm asking about the Canada Post pension plan. Okay. I believe, in fact, you recommended a permanent exemption from solvency valuation. Right. It strikes me that one of the reasons for that would be that Canada Post is a crown corporation. It's really part of the public sector, and I was just making the point that most federal public servants are part of a pension plan that is never subject to solvency valuation.
Right. So our point of view is that it was brought in for private sector employers, and it's counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve, because it does take away essentially money the corporation would have to fund other areas of the business, and essentially it serves no purpose. The pension plan currently, as stated in the task force document, has an $8.1 billion solvency deficit, but is in a surplus situation on a going concern basis, meaning that if the plan is able to continue into the future, which is of course the expectation, then there is no issue that we have enough assets to meet liabilities on a going forward basis.
Yes, excellent. I'd just like to turn things over to Corinne Trudel.
Merci. Je suis heureuse de...
Thank you. I'm happy to see you here once again in the committee. Ms. Macaulay, you talked about a study about the postal bank, and I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity. I did table a motion in the committee to obtain all the documents that the committee examined. And among these documents that I received on Monday, I don't see the study about Canada Post on postal banking, nor am I able to find the briefs or the names of the people who took part in this study. So I'd like to ask the chair whether we will be receiving this information piece by piece, where eventually will come to us.
7 minutes. We'll deal with that at the conclusion of this presentation by the witnesses.
Parfait. Merci, c'est gentil. Et
So I'd like to hear what you have to say. I know that you didn't have a chance to conclude your presentation. You had to hurry it up at the end. Perhaps you could continue. I think that you were talking about the fact that there had already been a study for postal bank relating to postal banking, and I'd be interested in finding about more if you have further information to add to this.
I met with the corporation last week, actually, at our semi-annual meeting. Mr. Chopra was referring to those meetings earlier today, and I had asked if the task force was given the unredacted study of the postal banking study that the corporation did, and we were told that the experts that the task force was using was given the unredacted study. So that's where we are at right now. And of course, we asked for it again, and to date, we haven't been given the study. And it's really hard to collaborate with the corporation on postal banking when we've given them our study and we've met with them, and they won't give us their study. And of course, their unredacted study, 711 of the 800 pages were redacted, and there's one page that does say it's a win-win. So we're very, very curious about that. But as far as our study goes, was established that there's 1,200 communities across Canada that do not have banking services, and out of the 615 Indigenous communities, there's only 54 of those communities that do have postal banking. So we see the need is there, and we certainly have the infrastructure, and we have the people ready and available, and they're FinTrack trained. Our folks, they're security clear. FinTrack training is the highest level of security training, and all our folks have that. So we're ready to go.
Lorsque nous avons rencontré
At our one of our committee meetings and in consultation, a number of people raised the question of hours of opening, the post offices, the hours of opening, business hours. You said that there had been a decrease in Canada Post. Do you think that it would be a good idea to increase the number of hours? And do you think that employees would be willing to have more flexible hours? For example, Saturday morning, for example, in small places where people might find this useful. What do you think of this?
Saturdays for 17 years, and I loved it. I got out of housework, but sorry, I had to go there. It was a standing joke in the house because I had 3 young sons, and it was sometimes fun to leave and have that break. But anyway, with that said, absolutely, our folks were devastated when they lost their Saturday hours and Saturday hours of service. And again, that was in line with promoting franchise. the corporation, and I say this with all due respect, they had a mandate to do the 5-point action plan, but they closed us at lunch. They opened us later in the day, closed us earlier to make us less convenient. So the public would embrace the privatized franchises who are open, I believe, about 76 hours a week. So absolutely, we would love to have the extended hours, and we're absolutely ready. There's lots of folks that are looking for good paying jobs in rural Canada. In fact, all over Canada, and it's not just rural. We've seen it in the urban too.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Drouin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be sharing 45 seconds, Mr. Whalen. It's yours.
J'espère que j'aurai moins de ça. Just what we heard, the question Mr. Trudeau posed, I just wanted to ask if we can convene at the end of the meeting for a couple of minutes about the issue, the basis on which we will get that report.
We will be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Everybody, thank you for being here, and Ms. McCauley, thank you for following up on that question and clarifying the point. I really appreciate it. But I'm not going to concentrate on postal banking today. I wanted to talk about pensions and get your view. And I've heard from just the previous testimony we heard from Mr. Chopra and Mr. Cheeseman. He said that we've been working with, solvency issues is not the only issue, but we would like to see perhaps joint governance. I just want to find out from you, has the management reached out to any of you? And I'm opening up the floor to.
Well, the short answer is no.
Okay.
Could you just rephrase it?
Oui, tantôt on a entendu parler de Monsieur.
Reference was made to something mentioned by Mr. Cheeseman. He said that the solvency problem is not necessarily an important thing. He talked about co-governance. That is, the unions would be represented in the board of directors and the management as well. This is a model that is being used in Ontario with teachers. I'd like to know whether you're open to this idea, or do you was this raised by managers? I'm not aware of this. Nothing would be. Are we open to it? Nothing is impossible. But as I say, I'm not aware of this, Mr. Paradis.
I don't think there is any provisions at the federal level that allow for joint governance. There's no specifications. I think some provincial jurisdictions allow it. I think that would require some legislative changes, which is maybe part of the bill that the Liberals are bringing forward in terms of target benefit legislation. So that's possibly why Mr. Cheeseman was talking about joint governance and things like that. So I think we would be open to options that would not reduce our members' pension benefits. I think there are a number of options that we can explore that would have no negative impact on pension benefits for our current members and future members. And I think that should be kind of the primary focus, to find a solution that's right for the businesses and also right for the employees and the members of the plan.
Well, it's actually something that my colleagues have heard on the road in Toronto, and somebody brought it up at how I think healthcare workers in Ontario and the Ontario Teachers Plan, that's the model they have, and they did make some legislative changes, but it allows them to not make those solvency payments because the risk and governance it's trusted. Now, the other issue that particular witness raised in Toronto was an independent board to manage the pension issue, and I just want to hear: would you be open to this? Because right now, I believe the pension reports is internal and it's within the corporation, but it's a completely third-party investment board. Is that something that you would entertain or would be opposed to, or?
I think we'd be certainly interested in learning more about it and listening to them if they were to talk to us. Your previous question, the way I understood it, is whether they had spoken to us, and I stand by my answer. They have certainly not approached us. Would we be open to the concept or the idea? I certainly would be willing to entertain discussions and find out more about it. And as Francois mentioned, provided that the legislative changes are put in place, everything is possible.
Okay, great. Well, since I still have 2 minutes left, just on the, I want to go back on the, I might hit postal banking. So from what I understood is the pilot projects were in Newfoundland, Ms. McCauley? Or the 16-year pilot project?
Yes, and Moose Factory.
Okay, and that involved for complicated transactions, and the reason why I said CFPs or you had to obtain your CFP was because the Scotiabank vice president had told us, or in the task force they quoted him as saying people are now going to the bank for more complicated transactions as opposed to less complicated transactions. So in Newfoundland it worked that if there were complicated transactions, then it would be the Bank of Montreal that would be taking those, or the bank manager?
Yeah, he would come to the community because people are traveling such great distances now to get to a bank. You know, some folks 4 hours, 2.5-hour drives, 6-hour boat ride, 3-hour skidoo ride. So the bank manager would come. It was easier for him, for one person to be on the road.
Okay, so he would have a scheduled time and then he would appear there. Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, 5 minutes, please.
Thanks for joining us, some of you again. Miss McCauley, especially, even though you spell your name wrong.
Take that up with my husband.
Anyways, yeah, no, it's great to have you here, and I appreciate the comments. We've traveled a lot, as you know, and we've heard a very, very clear from a lot of Canadians, especially in the rural areas, just how important the rural post offices, and we had a couple wonderful members from your association from Carstairs and Veterans joined us in Edmonton. So kudos to you. But we've heard a very loud and clear, you know, in rural areas, it really is, you know, very, very vital service. In big cities, Edmonton, for example, not as much. Like we, you know, where I live, I mean, within a 5-minute drive, I can run into 20 outlets and several corporate stores as well. But I just want to say thanks for your comments, and we've heard loud and clear the importance of the rural post offices. I'll open up to everyone here. One of the things we heard about for pensions, one of the suggestions, it was actually recommended by a representative from the Ontario teachers, was we talked about a shared risk where you'd have, you know, your set defined amount, and then the last part would be a shared risk if the fund did very well in a good year. The workers would share in the excess money. In a difficult year where the market drops, they would receive, you know, the base amount. And again, it came up both with Ontario teachers, but there was another pension expert. I don't know if it was Mercer, but one of them had commented it was a valid thing to look at and could be a way for Canada Post without having to look at defined contribution or other issues. I wonder if folks could comment on that.
Our position continues to be that, you know, the position continues to be in terms of the solvency deficit, or the solvency permanent solvency exemption. I think would be the first thing to take a look at. In terms of what you're raising, again, shared risk. In terms of usually that's what they call target benefit plans and things like that. But in terms of shared risk, a significant amount of the risk is still on the individual. In essence, I mean, people who retire on fixed incomes.
Here, and you know, you're very loud and clear, and I know that's your position. You need to protect the interests of your workers. And your comment was, you know, we're open to discussion as long as it does not affect, you know, their end benefit, which means someone else is going to have to bear the cost. But this was again brought up and suggested by Ontario teachers. So just want to hear, would you be open to something like that, where the large benefit is there, just the last little part is a shared risk, or is that just off the table altogether?
At this point, I think there are other options to explore prior to reducing employee benefits.
Mr. Mayhew?
I echo what Francois just said, that there are options, other options at this point to look at. And if you look at the experience of large pension plans in the U.S. that went from DB to DC, Only in the space of 10 years, I believe it was, they all went back to DB and found solutions for their problem. So the shared risk model, as I know it, and Francois mentioned it, the risk is...
I'm going to interrupt. Sorry, I'll be a bit more clear. What the teachers were talking about with the shared risk, they talked about more about the indexing part. And they found that was a very strong solution to a lot of the issues of rising costs was the shared risk was the indexation.
I find that interesting, actually, because in the last round of bargaining that we just concluded in August, that is one of the proposals that we submitted to the corporation, and that was refused.
We're short of time. Ms. McCauley, I want to hear from everyone. Ms. McCauley?
Yeah, we looked at indexing as an option.
Gentlemen?
We're willing to sit down and to listen, and as Francois said, to explore that possibility if it comes to the table, and we'll see.
Mr. West, anything to add?
No, I don't.
No? How much time?
Nothing. Thank you for that, though. Thanks for asking.
It's always great to see
we'll
another
close
McCauley,
with Mr.
though.
Whalen for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we're entering the, maybe the last couple of hours of testimony in this Canada Post study that we're undertaking. So I'm thanking you all very much for coming and sticking it out with us. We had an opportunity when we were in Scanterbury to do a drive-by and visit one of the postal outlets. It's a very modest structure, about the size of a woodshed. The people in the community told us that there's not even really enough space to store the parcels that are being stored there at the same time and have two people retrieve parcels. I think one person even said that he had to go outside to change his mind when he visited. And so with respect to these rural post offices that the concept is to turn them into hubs, Ms. McCauley, how many of them really have sufficient size to both serve the core function of parcel and mail delivery and also offer any other services at all in the physical size that these facilities operate in?
Well, that's a really fair question. We have 1,531 group post offices. That means that the postmaster provides the premise, and often they'll retrofit their home to have a post office in it, or it'll be in the garage. But there's a lot more criteria now around it to make it suitable, and obviously all those post offices won't be suitable. However, we do have 3,260 offices that our members operate, and I'm sure that probably 1,800 of them are a suitable location that has suitable parking.
With respect to the ones which are operated out of people's homes, should we investigate making those hubs? Isn't that almost like a franchise model in itself? I mean, you're providing this person with extra business opportunities, but they're running them out of their own home. It's not a corporate-owned location. Isn't that like a pseudo-franchise if we went to expand on that model? Or how is that different from franchising even?
Well, I'll tell you how it's different from franchises, because it's supported by the big picture. It's supported by the corporation. There's a network. It's part of that network. What happens is when we did a study, the difference between that and franchises aren't supported very well by the corporation. And often those franchises, we've seen when we studied all those communities that had a post office, it closed, they put in a franchise, and what happened was that franchise, because it wasn't supported, it wasn't sustainable, so that franchise closed, and in essence, they were left with nothing.
I see a bit of this, and I just want your perspective on this idea, perhaps, that even with the rural moratorium in place, the severe reduction in hours and quality of service and convenience of service at rural post office was really akin to breaching the rural moratorium. Yeah, how do you feel about that type of a statement? Or do you think, no, the services that are provided with 15 hours a week are still sufficient to serve the communities?
Well, it all depends. It all depends on the community. If the community has, 100 people, and the community is good with that, and it works for that community, and the mayor doesn't object, then if that works, it works.
Okay,
Every
thank you.
community is unique.
Very quickly, for each of the unions, how do you feel about the notion of having a postal regulator to oversee some of the higher end complaints that might exist between the union and the management, and also between pricing of mail delivery and the union, and sort of try to externalize some of the big issues facing postal delivery and parcel delivery in Canada, and have an expert third-party regulator oversee the activity in the marketplace.
It'll have to be a very, very brief answer, like a yes or no, or perhaps in each case.
It's a quick answer, and I can't really get into it. Based on what I've read in the discussion paper, I'd have to say no. There are some concerns without properly evaluating risks and what that would mean. I'd say no, but I would want a review of the board of directors at Canada Post, their composition, and basically how the relationship between the government, the board of directors, and the rest of the governance structure.
Very quickly, I'd love to hear.
If it's a fair playing field for everybody, meaning all the postal or parcel provider and not just Canada Post, that's something that's perhaps worth exploring. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
Works the time to explore. We have some concern, but I mean, works the time to sit down and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. To all our witnesses, thank you very much for once again appearing before us. Your testimony has been helpful, and we hopefully will be getting around to drafting a report on this within the next couple of weeks or so, and obviously I know you'll be very interested in seeing the results of that report when we table it in Parliament. The witnesses are excused. I would ask our committee members to stay at the table just for a couple of moments. We have about 6 minutes before the bells start ringing. Thank you, witnesses.
Do you want to suspend?
Well, no, because we'll just have to.
No, we're still
We'll deal
in
with these
public.
issues right now.
We're still in
public, so we won't, just I want you to be aware of that. We've got a couple of issues that we need to deal with. One, Madame Trudel and Mr. Whalen both raised, and that is to get hands on the Canada Post study on postal banking in its unredacted form. The Canada Post certainly is willing to accommodate. However, there are a few conditions which are attached to that, which is natural and quite in order, by the way, because of the commercially sensitive nature of a lot of the information contained in that report. The second challenge is the report itself is quite lengthy. It's about 800 pages. So we'll have to deal with this in an in-camera session. And the suggestion is, which again is in order with the procedures, compendium on procedures of the House of Commons, is that the report be delivered at an in-camera session to all members. Discussion can ensue from there, but once we leave, the reports are turned back to Canada Post. Now, the timing of that, it depends. I don't know how long. Obviously, it's a lengthy report. You'll see it for the first time and then go into the discussions after that. If we're looking at a meeting, I'll get to that in a minute, Aaron, we won't be able to do that now for any length of time unless we want to schedule an entire committee meeting for that purpose. If that's the case, the earliest opportunity would be the Monday we return from our Remembrance Day constituency week, which would be November the 14th. And I'm just wondering whether or not you would like that date. I saw Nick first, Aaron, and then you.
So one issue that I have with only having it during a committee meeting is that it's 800 pages. Right. And in the previous, in-camera discussions that we had, other things have been discussed, but I would like the document to be made available in a room, a data room, where people can go at their leisure over the course of a couple of days to familiarize themselves with the document, if that's possible, and then have a meeting based on their review of it that wouldn't interfere with the existing schedule. All the contents of the report are confidential, and so I don't think that us seeing it during the drafting of the report, but it will affect our interpretation of the testimony that we've received to date. And so I think it's important that we see it, but it also has to be a meaningful opportunity to review it. Meeting for 2 hours on an 800-page document is not meaningful. And I will draw the committee's attention to our right, if we so choose to do so, to reject any of these suggestions. We could simply say, well, that is fine, well and good, but we'd mentioned our desire to see this document in early September. Here we are now. You're still trying to negotiate conditions that we do not need to accept. We can just have the document delivered up forthwith. And so I think we can accommodate an opportunity whereby the document is made available in center block, in a room that we can visit at our leisure over the course of a couple of days, and take such necessary steps to review the 800 pages in a sufficient window, and then have a meeting after that time if we so choose. It may be that we do not need to meet after having had an opportunity to meaningfully review the document. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I will consult and once again review all of the, I guess, protections that Canada Post has and our rights versus our rights to determine exactly if what you're suggesting is within the art of the possible. Mr. Whelan, it very well may be. But your point is well taken on one level, and that is the fact that the report itself won't probably have any bearing on as we go forward on the drafting instructions and the delivery of the report. So I don't want to have that delay the initiation and the start of the drafting of the report. So we have the opportunity to see this, but it won't be until we get back from the break. So I'll certainly examine the fact whether or not we'll speak with Canada Post. We'll also consult with the procedural aspects of our rights and the rights of Canada Post, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate what you're suggesting. And I understand what you're saying, Nick, and I understand the document you're referring to. Aaron.
Well, Mr. Chair, when you suggest that the document would only be available to committee members in a meeting, I just want to clarify whether that's regular members of the committee. I would certainly make the case that Corrine, as the NDP's Canada Post critic, should also have access to the document.
Yeah, the rights and privileges of members of Parliament are certainly respected in that, and certainly Ms. Trudell would have that opportunity.
Okay, just wanted to confirm that. And I guess I just also wanted to make the point that we've had a pretty good process to receive the confidential reports prepared by the task force, where we had to sign out the documents. We got separately marked copies to prevent leaks. I'm not sure why that process wouldn't work for Canada Post's internal report on postal banking. I'm unclear on why that document would require some higher level of protection or secrecy.
And that's why I had mentioned to Mr. Whelan, I'll be examining exactly what is within the art of the possible and what our rights and privileges are with that respect. Mr. Whelan.
I would just like to quote from page 52 of The Power of Parliamentary Houses, to send for persons, papers, and records by Derek Lee. The top couple of paragraphs read, "The only person when the Canadian House of Commons imprisoned a person was in 1913 in respect of an individual, Mr. Connolly, who refused to provide documents ordered by a committee. Mr. Connolly's counsel," and it's being quoted here, "read a statement explaining that the books also contain private business matters unrelated to the concerns of the committee, which if made public would prejudice other clients of Mr. Connolly. The House ordered the books to be produced and delivered to the custody of the clerk of the House." A House or committee need not simply demand a copy of a document or the production of the original by the witnesses upon examination. It may also demand control over the document. So this is open to us, but I respect the right and the desire of Canada Post to keep things tight as possible. But at this stage, in order to preserve the legitimacy of our report, we need access to these documents, and I can't stress that any more strongly than I have.
And you've stressed it very strongly, and I agree with it. What that does not, which Mr. Lee's analysis does not do, is the right of confidentiality. Right of access is one thing, confidentiality is another, and that's what I'll be examining to see exactly where the twain shall meet. Mr. Duham.
I just want to put on the record that I'm not happy, even though I look happy. I'm not happy about them taking, as Madame Trudel put this motion when I was here, and you guys, all my colleagues went away, and we still don't have this issue resolved. I think it's a lack of respect for this committee, and I just wanted to state that on the record.
Thank you. Any other comments? The second point is as far as timing for tomorrow's meetings. We will convene at 10 a.m. in, I think, room 237D. We will hear Canadian Union of Postal Workers at that time, followed by the task force. Then at 12 noon, in the same room, we'll switch disciplines and go to listening to Mr. Bryson, ministers or representatives from the Department of Finance and PCO on the estimates process. And then we will have to change rooms from 1 to 2 to deal with the drafting instructions for our report on Canada Post. We will also at that time discuss both the issues we had discussed at the last meeting, the analyst suggestion as the outline, Mr. Whalen's, and if there's any suggestions from other members of the committee. That will be in camera, but that will be in room 253D. So we'll get the guide map out for you tomorrow, but we'll just have to change rooms for that last portion of our meeting. Right, Mr. Clark?
I just wanted to say that I strongly agree with my colleague, Mr. Whelan, and I think that I just want to thank him for what you just read to us, and I think that the conventions and the rights of the House of Commons should strongly be followed by any outside actors of this society, and I don't like when there is arrogance toward this House of Commons. So thank you very much, Nick.
I don't, and not that I'm defending Canada Post, because they certainly don't need me to defend them, but this is not any arrogance as I interpret it. It's just their rights and our rights, and both have to be observed.
Mr. Chair, who commissioned the report? Canada Post did or an independent party?
I don't know the answer to that, but we'll find out when we
Because
get the
if it is not Canada Post's report, if it hasn't commissioned it, then legally it's not Canada Post's report.
Well, as I say, Madame Ratanzi, I'm going to be examining all aspects of this. We are adjourned.
Thank you.